The New Orleans Saints have a chance on Sunday to prove that the game against the Raiders was the truth and that the game against the Ravens was simply the floor. Can they get it done? We're breaking it all down on this Locked On Steelers and Locked On Saints crossover Thursday. What is going on, New Orleans Saints and Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Thank you very much for joining us for this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Saints. We've got Chris Carter in the house at Carter Critiques on Twitter, your daily host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, bringing you everything you need to know about the Pittsburgh Steelers every Monday through Friday. Myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, host of Locked On Saints. Same thing, but with them New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen or first watch of the day every day. Here is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is awesome. We love it. Chris, I know you use it. I use it crazy. Man, we love us some Prize Picks. It's super easy here. Let me tell you a little bit about it. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players and then choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projection. It is that simple. And of course, they now are responsible for all of our crossover Thursdays here. Daily fantasy made easy. So you pick those players, you pick against the projections, you get those right. You can win up to 10 times your entry. Literally takes less than 60 seconds to enter. You could have already put in your entries. Chris just did, actually. He's already got his in.
Yep.
It's that easy. We love Prize Picks. We know that you'll love Prize Picks too. First-time users, you're going to be able to get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code LOCKED ON. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code LOCKED ON. Chris, we have the New Orleans Saints traveling to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This used to be a storied game because of the two head coaches, Sean Payton up against Mike Tomlin. This will be the first time these two teams in a decade and a half have met without it being a matchup of those two coaches. Today, we're going to break down the matchups that you need to watch. We'll give you our predictions, but we're going to start off with the biggest stories. Chris, what's the biggest story there in Pittsburgh right now? Because I know you're itching. I know you're ready for him back.
It's easy, baby. It's the return of TJ Watt.
Yeah.
It's what everyone's talking about right now because everyone's been waiting for it. Jerry Dulac, my colleague at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover Pitt athletics. Jerry Dulac's been covering the Steelers for a long time. When Jerry sources something, you know that it's coming from a good source. And he said a month ago, TJ Watt will return after the bye week. And here we are after the bye week. TJ Watt's been practicing. We're not allowed to say everything we see in the Steelers practice per their team policy, but we got the pictures of him looking pretty good in some drills. So TJ Watt gone. He had an arthroscopic knee surgery. He had his torn pec situation, but according to the people we've talked to, it was not a serious torn pec situation because there's different grades about it. I had a physical therapist, Dr. Karina Maharaja, come on our show to talk about the differences. It's clear he didn't have the worst one. He's back and he's ready to go.
That's huge, man.
Ross, when we've looked at the Steelers, when he's played 60% of the snaps or more in a game over the last 2 seasons, they are 11-2.
Whew. That's a difference maker, man. It's so hard to find those guys on the defensive side of the football, too.
It really is. I mean, you see when he's in, Alex Highsmith's able to get pressure. When he's in, Cam Hayward's able to get pressure. And when they're getting pressure, the secondary's feeding off of it, and it's allowing them, and they're stuffing the run better. And it feeds off of that. And then the offense, they're getting short fields because of the turnovers. That's how they beat the Bengals. That was their most impressive win of the season, and it's the only time they've had TJ Watt. And they lost him right before the Bengals scored the tying touchdown that sent them to overtime. So, him being back is such a big deal. And I know some people out there are like, he's just one guy. That one guy has made the Steelers like a super competitive team when he's been on the field.
It makes such a big difference. I was talking to a Saints player not too long ago. We were kind of talking about the defensive line, particularly we were talking about the interior defensive line, but I think really for pass rushers as a whole, right? Any of these guys that are pressure players, right? I know TJ Watt does a lot more than that, but edge rushers win when the interior defensive line gets a push because the quarterback can't step up in the pocket. The interior defensive linemen win because guys get around the edge and then force these quarterbacks to stay inside and not be able to get outside the pocket. There's so much of sort of the symbiotic relationship between how it all works. So it's not surprising at all for me to hear not only is TJ Watt successful when he's on the field, but the players around him are more successful when he's on the field too, because he's impacting those plays. And let's just be real, teams have to dedicate resources to limit that guy, which means if those other guys are getting one-on-ones, all they got to do is win the one-on-ones.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is that you're allowing guys to live there. Cam Hayward's been getting double team. Alex Highsmith was getting double team. At one point, Alex Highsmith, 6.5 sacks, still a very good start to the season.
Yeah.
But at one point, he was leading the NFL in sacks, and but a lot of it was 3 of them came in the one game that he had TJ Watt, and he wasn't getting double teamed or wasn't getting the top priority of offensive lines and protection packages. Now he is. So that's the biggest story for the Steelers right now is TJ Watt back. What's the biggest story for the Saints?
Yeah, I think for the New Orleans Saints right now, it's got to be about the quarterback play, man. I think, the Saints quarterback play, offense kind of came crashing down to earth after a week of optimism, shutting out the Las Vegas Raiders. Alvin Kamara, 3 touchdowns in that game. The only 3 touchdowns that the team scored. 24 points, though. And then they come back up against the Baltimore Ravens. They luck into a late touchdown where Chuck Clark just completely gave up on the play. But shout out to Juwan Johnson for playing through the whistle, of course. But, it was a crashing back down to reality type of a game for them. And there's some talk that this is Andy Dalton's chance right now. It's where if Andy Dalton goes in there and doesn't play well against that Pittsburgh defense, which is going to be a better defense than what you're going to look at in terms of like offensive or defensive statistics and all these other things you might look at, like they're going to rank a certain place, but that's not really indicative of who they are as a defense. It's not going to be an easy defense to move the ball against. And so that's going to be the big story. This could be the deciding game that sort of makes a decision about whether or not the New Orleans Saints go back to Jameis Winston. So that's going to be a big, big, big piece that's going to play out in Pittsburgh.
I'm intrigued to see that, especially because Andy Dalton has a long history of losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I was going to say, they're not unfamiliar with this guy.
They have, they're not. And then here's the thing. Most of the guys on this roster are like Andy Dalton's been gone from the Bengals for a long time. I think Cam Hayward and TJ Watt are like the only guys who were around when Andy Dalton was leading the Bengals and when they were competitive too.
Right.
The Bengals with Dalton were competitive. So that's something. But also another thing to watch out for, DeMonte KZ is set to return at the safety position. He was a guy in training camp when he was there, Ross. They had him, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds. The safeties were flying everywhere. They were disguising stuff, moving here, moving there, and it electrified the secondary. It electrified the whole defense because they were able to disguise stuff, cover for each other. And when KZ got hurt in the preseason, they said he broke his whole forearm. He had to heal that up. Yeah, right. That's when he told me that. I was like, I'm good. I don't need
that hurt me.
Right. Seriously, just hearing it, I'm like, how do you break your whole forearm?
The whole thing?
Right, the whole thing. But he's back. He says I'm going to be ready for Sunday. He's gonna allow the Steelers to deploy a lot of packages that they have not been able to use and that they drew up all summer long at training camp. I was watching these guys fly around. I'm like, man, there's something there. So Andy Dalton could also have a disadvantage of seeing a lot of packages that the Steelers just haven't used yet, and they're coming out of a bye. That's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
6 days of rest for the New Orleans Saints, 14 days in between games for, let me not call it rest, right? These guys are practicing. They're working their tails off. But still, 6 days between games. Right. 6 days between games for the Saints, 14 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know who's very familiar with Andy Dalton and makes it so much more complicated than anything else, though, for me, is Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin knows him some Andy Dalton. So that's the X factor for me. But hey, the Saints are really familiar with DeMonte KZ too, because he started over in Atlanta. So we'll see how it all works out. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of those matchups, right? We talked about Andy Dalton and Mike Tomlin. We talked about TJ Watt coming back. But what are the specific matchups that we're watching in this game that can be the difference makers? We're going to get that to you here as Chris Carter and I have Locked on Steelers and Locked on Saints continue on with our crossover Thursday episode. But first, my man, today's episode
is brought to you by Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, you can find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring, and each ring is one of a kind. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Well, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift for every budget. Make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, so be sure to use that promo code Locked On. That's code Locked On, LOCKEDON, all one word. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today.
All right, family, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Saints. Chris Carter and I bringing you the best voiced crossover this network has to offer. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to break down some matchups here that are going to be the difference makers in this game. Saints and Steelers going head-to-head on Sunday in the beautiful city of Pittsburgh. I'll be there. Chris will be there. It's going to be a ton of fun. Before we get to that, though, I want to let you know, make sure you go and check out our friends over at Locked On Sports today for your second listen today. From all the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, you get to go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. It's over with the Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, several matchups for us to talk through here, Chris, because we got a lot of stuff that we like in this one. So let's start off with you here. What's one of the matchups that you're watching in this game that could be a big time difference maker?
Well, you mentioned earlier how Alvin Kamara is such a playmaker for the Saints. He gets a lot of the scoring done. They have to find a way to shut him down. And I think one of the biggest guys that'll be tasked with that is Devin Bush. Yeah. And it won't just be Devin Bush. It has to be also TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith pinching the edges, Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Chris Wormley, all the guys in the interior of the defensive line. They got to hold their spots. But Devin Bush was drafted to be the speedy linebacker who can go sideline to sideline, run and cut off the fast running backs, and also help cover them in the passing game. I think that's a huge part of what Devin Bush has to accomplish in this game. And what Devin Bush, if you followed his career, had a really good rookie season, most tackles ever by a rookie in Steelers history. Then his second year tears his ACL and his MCL, out for the year after 6 games, comes back in 2020, doesn't look the same, not explosive, not decisive, looks kind of timid when he's attacking the ball. This year, he's looked a lot better. Still not back to where he was when he was trending to being maybe a Pro Bowl caliber guy as a rookie, but still a better player and one who's been better for the defense this year. I really think that moving forward, Devin Bush can be an asset to the Steelers, and the question will be, I think, long-term, they didn't sign him to his 5th-year extension, so will he stick around with the Steelers? But I think in this game, this is an opportunity for him to make a statement and say, hey, I belong here. Because 2020, they had a season opener against Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants. And the Steelers held him. I think Saquon Barkley had 12 rushes. They held him to the fewest yards by any running back who rushed 12 times in an NFL game in the league's history. And so Devin Bush was a huge part of that. That's why they drafted him. They need him to show that in this game. I think that if he gets that, it makes the Saints one-dimensional. It makes Andy Dalton one-dimensional, which is what the Steelers need to do to win.
Yep. That's huge. And I'll tell you what, New Orleans Saints are going to be looking to get their run game going. If they can't get it going with Alvin Kamara, there's one other guy they're going to turn to.
Oh.
There's another guy. Choo-choo. It's the Tay train, baby. Look, listen, I'm all about it, okay? I mentioned in my Wednesday episode over at Locked On Saints that if you're going to keep rolling with Andy Dalton, that's fine. That's a way that you're going to go. And it's good of the organization to be able to just make a decision and stick with it, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But he ain't putting the points on the board for you. He's got a couple of games with 1 touchdown. He's got a 3-touchdown game. He's got a 2-touchdown game, but he's not the guy that's lighting up the scoreboard. What's happening is Taysom Hill is scoring 4 touchdowns in a game. He's scoring a couple of touchdowns in a game. Alvin Kamara is scoring 3 touchdowns in a game. That's where the scoring is coming from. So it's got to be this. Listen, 5 or more touches in a game for Taysom Hill. That's the benchmark. That's the threshold. That's sort of the key. With 5 or more touches, 403.5 yards per game, 29.2 points per game. You know why? Because he finds the end zone. That drops by nearly 80 yards. That drops by more than 2 touchdowns when he touches the ball 4 or fewer times in a game. so far this season. And then on drives where he touches the ball, period, those produce more touchdowns, those produce more yards on a per drive basis. He is a big time key. So I'm looking at Taysom trying to win the edge against a returning TJ Watt. Two big time freight trains just heading at one another. Give me that matchup all day. And not because I like it for Taysom, I like it for good football. That's why. You got another one?
Yes, I do. Flipping to the Saints defense. A lot of this is going to be Kenny Pickett versus Tyrann Mathieu and the Saints secondary, and just figuring out where to go with the ball. Because Kenny Pickett, anyone looks at his stats, 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions to start his career. Now, I covered Kenny Pickett in his last 2 years with Pitt football. He was a guy who took years to develop, and once he understood the Panthers system, he was on point. He knew where his receivers are going to be, and he would read the defenses. The first game and a half, the first time he played against the Jets, he had 3 interceptions, but 2 of those were balls that should have been, actually all 3 of them were balls that should have been played better by his receivers. Some of the other interceptions, though, as we've seen the season go along, have been on him and his poor decision making, and that's part of being a rookie. You know, one thing that Alan Saunders, Steelers beat reporter from Pittsburgh Sports Now here in Pittsburgh, he said on my show weeks ago, he said, listen, when people said he was pro ready does not mean when you're coming out of college that you're ready to be a pro and be an all pro. It means you're ready to get your butt kicked and learn how to do it the right way. And that's who Kenny Pickett is. And I think that Kenny Pickett, his approach to the game, like he's not going out there and being like, oh, woe is me, I threw 3 interceptions. He's like, dang it, I got to get better. And Mike Tomlin, after he threw 2 fourth quarter interceptions that could have been either one of those drives or a touchdown, they beat the Dolphins in that game. Mike Tomlin was seen walking him off the field and being like, hey, head up. Even in the tough times, you've got to have your head up and talk with him. I think Kenny Pickett, this will be an interesting game because now you're facing a Saints defense that hasn't been, as good as we've seen some of the Saints defenses be in the past years. And now you've had a bye week. You've had some time to go over your game, be more solidified, focus on your fundamentals. Now I think this is a time, can Kenny Pickett show, hey, I've taken some steps forward. I don't think he's going to light the Saints up or anything like that, but I think that this is a chance to show that, hey, when I start to get settled, I can make big plays, and I think this is why that's why that matchup. The Saints are going to play head games. They're going to play chess matches. They're going to try to fool him. Kenny has to study well, be ready, and make good on-field decisions to just take the open man.
Yep, especially now that the Saints have PJ Williams back as well. Having PJ Williams back is kind of that key that unlocks their ability to be able to show one thing pre-snap, rotate post-snap. They're going to try to do a lot to confuse the rookie quarterback for sure. The Saints, Dennis Allen told us in his Tuesday presser that Kenny Pickett, they thought was the highest graded, the top rated quarterback in this class. They have a ton of respect for him. And I think because of that, they're going to want to treat him the way that they're not going to treat him like a rookie quarterback. They're going to treat him like a veteran quarterback. So they're going to show him everything, but they're also going to bring pressure. Yeah. And they're going to try to get after him. And I know he's actually got a better passer rating when blitz than when he's not blitz. He does a good job at understanding, okay, the blitz is coming from here, so something's open over there. Does a good job getting the ball out, and he does it accurately. Those are all plus things. However, one of the key pieces that the Saints are going to be utilizing, I believe, in this game is going to be Demario Davis. Demario Davis has been asked to rush the passer less this season than he was the season before, and he's got 6 sacks on the year. He has been incredibly efficient as a pass rusher when asked to help to supplement from the second level. So I think a combination of that and the fact that Demario is probably going to be tasked with a little bit more coverage responsibility because it seems unlikely that Pete Werner, who is carted off the field, or not off the field, sorry, carted from the injury tent to the locker room against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football, unlikely to me that Pete Werner plays. So Demario is going to have a little bit more of his kind of like, hands in the salad, if you will. So he's going to be doing a lot of getting mixy in the middle, doing all these other things. So I think that's the matchup that I'm also going to be watching is Kenny Pickett, who, just like any rookie quarterback, is going to be looking to attack the middle of the field, just like any good quarterback is going to be looking to attack the middle of the field. That's going to be Demario Davis's territory. That's going to be his stronghold. That and him supplementing as a pass rusher. Both those things are going to be big.
I agree. I think that's a great matchup there. And I think the pressure is so big, and the Steelers don't have a good offensive line right now. Now, I will say, the strength of the Steelers' offensive line is pass protection. They've done a lot better at that this year as far as timing and everything, but they haven't done a great job at run blocking, and that's why Najee Harris hasn't gotten going this year. He was even last year was even able to get going a little bit more than he has this year. It's been a disappointment to see his lack of production, but a lot of it is because the opponents are getting two guys in the backfield before he can get going, and he's like, okay, I got to change the entire play here. So I think that'll be interesting. But absolutely, Demario Davis, that Saints front, getting after Kenny Pickett, not letting him get his feet set, not letting him get comfortable. Kenny Pickett still does have some happy feet to him right now in the NFL, and that's something that he didn't have to worry about too much at Pitt, because their offensive line, I mean, they still they keep offensive linemen at Pitt. They're able to develop. So like that, they had the chemistry for years. They still had, in fact, the same offensive line that was protecting him last year is still there right now for Pitt. So like, wow. That's how consistent they are, and they're just not that right now for the Steelers. If the Saints get after him, they're gonna cause some problems.
Gonna be an interesting and fun one to watch. Those are the matchups to watch throughout this game that are gonna end up impacting it. These are the things you're gonna be watching that you're gonna be like, man, I remember Ross and Chris were talking about exactly that right there, and that's deciding the game. I promise you that. Coming up next, though, we're gonna give you our predictions. You like the Steelers, you like the Saints. We'll break everything down here with our predictions as we continue on and wrap up this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Saints.
But today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can follow the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including the NBA, the NFL, NHL, all things sports right there on BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, y'all, wrapping up this Thursday crossover edition, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Saints. We got you covered, everything you need to know about this Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the New Orleans Saints matchup this Sunday in Pittsburgh. Right now, the New Orleans Saints are road favorites in this one. Not a position that they have been in very much throughout this season. Not even just road favorites, but just being favorites at this point. Not necessarily a position that the Saints have been in. Right now, our friends over at BetOnline, Chris just told you about, make sure you go and check them out. 1.5 point favorites, the New Orleans Saints traveling, got an over-under of 40 points. They're looking at it at being a pretty close game, but not anything like too wacky, crazy, anything like that. So you're probably looking at like a 21-20 type of a matchup if you're taking the Steelers and the points. So when you look at this game, whether it's against the line, I mean, it's so tight, right? Like this one, if you're picking them against the line, you're probably picking them to win. But when you look at this one, how do you feel this game shakes out?
I think this game is going to be a grinded out type of defensive game where I do think you see a return to what the Steelers can be with the defense with TJ Watt. I think they're going to have some lapses at times. I think a big part of this, though, does depend on, can Larry Ogunjobi and Miles Jack get back to practicing? Both of them missed Wednesday practices. Now, I will say Wednesdays are typically when the Steelers let those guys kind of rest. We'll see if they practice. Also, William Jackson III didn't practice Wednesday, and he was just, of course, traded from the Washington Commanders onto the roster as of last week. So you got to see who's healthy there. But if TJ Watt's healthy, it makes so many more things better. If Larry Ogunjobi and Miles Jack are healthy, I think that greatly helps their run defense. I don't think that Kenny Pickett is his coming out game where he lights people up for a bunch of yards. But I do think this is a game where he is more efficient against the Saints. I also think this is a game where Najee Harris gets a little bit of something going there. And I think it's a sloppy game. There's going to be lots of plays where people are just shaking their head at the offense. But I think that both defenses get some turnovers. Both defenses get some key stops. But I think in the end, it comes down to which defense can be more dominant against the opposing offense. And I think that's where I have to give the Steelers an edge, in that if TJ Watt is back to 100% the way he looks like he is in practice, I think that kind of shades in their favor. Minkah Fitzpatrick can roam the field. He can go after. He's picked off Joe Burrow the last few times he's played him. I think he could pick off Andy Dalton. And if the Steelers are able to do those things, be healthy, get after the quarterback, stuff the run, they're going to be the playmakers on defense. And the offense, I think, does just enough to win. I give them 17-13. So I will take under in the point there. But I do think that the Steelers, one thing that Kenny Pickett does almost in every drive, every game, he has one drive where it's like 12 plays, 80 yards, dink dunk, touchdown some weird way. And it's not, sometimes it's not even him. Sometimes it's Chase Clay. Well, he's gone now, but Chase Claypool threw a touchdown to Derek Watt of all people, against the Eagles, one against the Dolphins. Kenny Pickett got him down the field and then threw a fade pass to George Pickens. It's just, they're good for one of those drives a game, and then they don't do much else. But I think a couple turnovers give them good field position, and that's how they find a way to win. So I got the Steelers winning 17-13. But Ross, what say you?
Man, that's funny. We're almost exactly spot on in terms of the score. I'm going 17-14. But I've been adamant about not changing my preseason picks throughout this season.
Oh, I change mine all the time.
I tried to give it a shot to see if I could like roll with it and everything like that. So far, I've been okay. I'm a couple losses up. I had the Saints originally like through this point in the season. I think I had them at 5-4. Yeah, I had them at 5-4. Right now they're at 3-6. So, I had them a little bit more, but I didn't have them, overwhelmingly out here running the table. So I'm going to stick with the Saints in this one. And I think at this point, like part of it is that they need this win, right? They're in a division that no team has a winning record.
They can catch the NFC South.
They can actually still win this division, which is absolutely insane to me. And I'm just giving them kind of the benefit of the doubt here to say that the baseline of their game is somewhere in between the stellar game we saw with the Raiders and then the poor game that we saw against the Ravens. And that reality is somewhere in between those two. And that makes me feel better about them than if I were to say that the baseline was what we saw against the Ravens. So it's not a great matchup for them, especially with TJ Watt returning. But if Chris Olave can continue to get involved, if Jarvis Landry can make it back out to the field, and if Ryan Ramczyk's not out, he was kind of listed as estimated as not. I think he was limited in for the Saints game. Actually, I have the injury report right here. Why don't you just look at it, dummy? I got it right here. He was limited, but like you mentioned, Wednesday for the Saints is kind of like a rest thing for them as well. So we'll see throughout the rest of the week. But if they play, then I think the Saints could actually have a chance here. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up going 17-13 the other way. But I'm going to take the Saints 17-14 this way. And one other matchup that I forgot to talk about that I think is a difference maker here is going to be rookie wide receiver George Pickens against rookie cornerback Alontae Taylor. The Saints are going to have to make sure that they're eliminating the passing game as much as possible. This is a team that only has 2 interceptions on the season, both of which by Tyrann Mathieu. But Alontae Taylor keeps getting his hands on him. And they're just he's not reeling him in, but he's getting his hands on him. So I'm looking for him to get his first career interception. He's been stellar through his first 3 games. Can he make it a 4th game? Can he make it happen against a rookie wide receiver and a rookie quarterback, just like he's a rookie corner? This is the most opportune moment for him, possibly. And it's going to be a lot of fun watching those two guys because they're incredibly confident, George Pickens and Alontae Taylor. So looking forward to seeing this one. But I'm going to take the Saints. I'm going to roll with them right here, 17-14.
I don't blame you for taking the Saints. The Steelers have been so up and down this year. I totally get it. I think this game is definitely a toss-up. But let me tell you, Alontae Taylor better come correct because George Pickens is him. I'm telling you that the Steelers...
Okay. It's so funny that you should say that. Alontae Taylor, behind the left ear, tattoo. You know what it says?
Him.
I'm him.
Yeah.
So the two hymns
now.
The two hymns.
I think that's going to be really interesting because, like, George Pickens... There's been so many plays when you go back and you watched all 22, like in the Eagles game, he got no catches. But there's so many plays where he dusts his man, then he looks, and then like he just didn't get the ball, and he just goes like, "Come on, guys, like get me the football." And I mean, you saw that catch he had against the Browns, one-handed fading away. That's the kind of stuff he's done in camp all year. Like in practice, it's gotten to the point where like he does it, and the Steelers are like, Like it's just like it's casual now, and it's just they need the quarterback play to get better. If this was prime Ben Roethlisberger, George Pickens would be looking like Antonio Brown. Like that's where people are kind of at with him, is that he's going to be the next great Steelers wide receiver. But they need the quarterback play. Alontae Taylor's going to have a good matchup. But that's why I said I think the bigger matchup is Kenny Pickett versus the entire secondary. If he's not seeing the field, if he's not taking the shots, That's where I think the problem's going to come. But I'll be very intrigued to see how he plays, because without Chase Claypool, I've said it all for the last 2 weeks, I think that the Steelers are going to simplify the offense. I think they're going to make things like give him less options to worry about and say, hey, you know what? You got these 2 reads and a check down. That's it. Don't try to worry about 5 guys and what the look at the defense, identify the weaknesses we told you to look for, and that's what you got to do. I'll be intrigued to see if Kenny Pickett pulls that off.
This is going to be a fun game, one way or another. Defensive mind against defensive mind. It's going to be and it's on natural grass field.
Oh yeah.
Let me just say that out loud for the people in the back. Chris, I appreciate you so much, man. Raise a glass to you. Raise a glass to Unc. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in here for a Locked On Steelers, Locked On Saints crossover. You want more on this matchup? You can check out Chris over at Locked On Steelers on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. You can check me out for more on the Saints on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Steelers, Locked On Saints, proud partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, for another listen for today, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today. Get all the biggest stories, take of the day, everything you're looking for around the world of sports in ways that only the Locked On Podcast Network can provide. You can find that on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. For Chris Carter, I am Ross Jackson, at Carter Critiques, at Ross Jackson Nola. We appreciate you very much for coming through, making us a part of your day, and we'll see you one way or another on Friday. Appreciate you so much for tuning in and for being here as a part of the proud part of that Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.